As COVID continues, we're beginning to realize that, HR as a function cannot work separately or in silos. For instance, realize that our talent acquisition team must work together with the analytics team, must work together with the learning and development organization, and must work with the employee engagement or organization development organization. And we call this OneHR. And this is really required for us to really build the common thread across the HR organization so that together we can support other lines of business functions as well as the whole organization in the next phase of transformation. So today I'm really glad to have with us three very visionary as well as very experienced HR leaders with us. Right? And first of all, let me introduce you to Shalu Manan. Thanks, Shalu, for joining us. And Shalu is the VP for HR and Digital Transformation with Genpact, which is a huge IT and services organization. And thanks, Shalu. And we have Ongmu Gombu. Ongmu is a VP for HR for Greater China and Intercontinental. I was for GSK Pharma. And welcome, Ongmu, to the session. I was asking Ongmu just now, wow, how wide is Greater China plus Intercontinental? And I realized that your territory includes Canada as well, besides Asia and Asia Pacific. And last but not least, let's welcome Vikramjit Singh. Vikram is President and CHRO of Bajaj Allianz General Insurance. Thank you very much, our three distinguished panelists, for joining us today. And so before we start, we have a poll. We have a poll, and which is in the link in your chat box for our audience here. So if you can click on the link, there's a poll question that you can answer, and we'll give you a couple of seconds, and we'll share your response that will help us to kick off the session. So for the benefits of everyone, if you click on the link, you'll see the question, but the question is, as companies are looking to reinvent the workplace to be future ready, what is going to be your utmost talent management priority? And you have three options there. If you can just click on one of the options, then we'll see the results in due time. While this is happening, let me ask okay, the results are coming. All right, so, well, let me see. So first of all, I think most of you choose delivering the right mix of learning for a hybrid and digital workforce. So clearly, learning and development is top in your mind. And then we have a balance of focusing on digital transformation and leveraging technology to boost employee engagement. So now I can see that, first of all, focus on learning development, and then similar priority between change management and employee engagement. So that's great. That allows us to kick off the session. But before we go into the questions proper, let me ask our three distinguished panelists a more fun question, if you would. So the question is, if you have a choice to be anywhere in the world right now, where would you choose to be? Anyone? Shalu, we try to kick it off.
You want me to give my interesting answer I was giving you, Frank, just before this?
Yeah, sure, please.
I was sharing with Frank, everyone, that I would want to be in any part of the world where there is no corona, and I have to not count till 20 seconds when I'm washing my hands. I guess it came down to a very simple hope that I have, that I want a world where I'm a little free of the mental stress and paranoia that we have all come to live and figure out ways to deal with on a daily basis in the last 1.5 years.
Right, that's good. Yeah, it's like I was saying, some of COVID has actually changed our life totally. Right, we have to be mindful of things that we took for granted before. So thanks for sharing, Shalu. What about Ongmu? Where would you rather be?
Um, yeah, I think being in Singapore, I guess, where I would really like to be is just, I guess, feel the seasons a little bit more, Frank. So I'd like to be somewhere up in the mountains, probably, I think, is where I'm thinking. It's just very hot out here, yeah.
Right, right. Yeah, totally, Omu. I mean, for the audience, Omu and I are based in Singapore at the moment, and we are in the midst of a bit of a heightened lockdown or restrictions, if you would, due to the new strain that is transmitting in the city. And like you say, Singapore is kind of a bit flat without many places to go during this time. So definitely a wish for other better places. And Vikram.
So, Frank, for sure, Corona not being there is something which all of us would wish for in that way. But with my family, actually on a beach, it has been a pretty long time for us that we have really gone out for a vacation. Actually, Pune is a city where I am based off, is like in mountains, which is also nice weather. But maybe what you don't get is what you think you should go for, and maybe that's the reason actually going for a beach in that place along with family.
Great, great, great. Maybe Ongwai and you should exchange location, Vikram, because Singapore has a lot of beaches, but no mountains. But in Pune, you have
No
mountains,
mountains.
less of a beaches. So
Yeah,
the grass definitely is greener on the other side.
exactly.
Okay, thanks so much for this fun facts. And so what I'll do is that I'll get into the more serious questions, if you don't mind. So I'd like to ask the panelists, you know, we all know that digital transformation actually started well before COVID for many organizations, but COVID has accelerated the transformation itself. So I'd like to ask if you can share how your business objectives have been impacted or changed by COVID. Anyone to kick it off? Yes, Anu?
Yeah, I can go first, I guess. I think, like you said, Frank, clearly, I think what COVID has done is accelerated. And I think it really depends on your industry and business model, right? So for us, we're in pharma. And if you really look at it, the fundamental business model has remained intact. But what the pandemic has done is really accelerated digital transformation in how we engage with patients and doctors. So I think that is a big shift that we've seen. So therefore, how doctors want to be reached, for example, what channels they're willing to try in this very busy period for them, for patients, for example. And then if you flip that around to the capabilities within the organization, is then we need to really prepare for our sales team, our marketing teams, and medical teams on how they sort of reach out to the doctors, and in certain areas how patients also end up purchasing and getting access to the medicines. So there's a big shift there, right, from a business model perspective. And for us in HR, I think when you look at business model, it's really about how we interact with employees. And if you look at it, I think there is a big shift around a new normal, right, Shalu? I mean, we were just chatting just before the call about what the new normal means in terms of the people business. It's going to be a lot about how do we work remotely, how do we collaborate remotely, building capabilities also of line managers, because they are the ones that have to be a lot more self-sufficient, much more than ever before. uh, and I think if I put two together, for me, I think what becomes really really critical and the new elements is to be very very specific on what and which stakeholder you want to target. And in the middle of all of this, it's a very busy time digitally. The internet, there's so much of information. So I feel what becomes really important is simplification in this. And are we really really helping, whether it is patients, doctors, solve a problem, or what value add? So I think I look at it, in that backdrop, I see these two areas about, are we really simplifying the complex, or are we adding more noise to the clutter that's already there?
Hmm. Thanks, Anu. That's I love the simplifying the complexity during this time, and we know that there's huge amounts of complexity amongst us. Anyone, Shalu or Vikram?
So I can go, Frank, next. So Very clearly, Frank, when I look at this, and typically the two parts of digital transformation is the transformation and the digital side. Transformation actually has been happening every time around. Digital a little more accelerated because of the remote way in terms of the work has been happening, whether from a business perspective and indirectly for the people perspective. And clearly, when I look at it from our organization perspective, we clearly were seeing that one, this transformation is helping us to reach out to customers very fast. Which indirectly through a lot of intermediaries, even intermediaries actually went into building their skills around reaching out to customers through the digital sites, which is it. So one is the reach, which changed the way we are reaching the customers. The second is a hyper personalization and the with from a solutioning perspective, which mean that that solution which is for the end customer or for the intermediaries or for internal employees, it was a big opportunity to actually go for a hyper personalization from a solutioning perspective. And for us it meant where we have a long list of products and services which we do, how do we do that? Then in the end, from a customer service perspective, it helps to get a lot of continuously seamless data which is happening. And with that data, how do you provide that unique servicing from a long term perspective, which is there to build a true solutioning and a care brand, which we want to be always. Now, that's how overall business obviously was actually taking shape. And similarly, for the people, when you look at it, is a very similar way. When our people actually access a lot of things which are hyper personalized, how do you develop an internal people framework or an ecosystem which is also hyper personalized and provides the solution anytime, anywhere, whether it is in terms of learning or in terms of hiring? How does it actually go from that perspective? And maybe we can talk about it subsequently, but that's how the broad actually whole ecosystems got changed both for the business and from a people perspective.
Excellent. Thanks for sharing the hyper personalization concepts here. Thank you. And Shanu?
Sure. I mean, I think Ongo and Vikramjit have talked about two key points, right? Simplification and hyper personalization. I think that's as true for our type of business as well. I think what's unique about Genpact is the fact that we are a professional services company and we are serving a pharmaceutical company. We're also serving a bank. We are serving a wide range of industries in our own portfolio. And as we went through the motions of COVID and what it did to us, I mean, impact on supply chains, impact on how professional services in space of finance and accounting as fundamental as supporting sourcing and procurement for organizations has to be done. I think as our customers were evolving, we were constantly and with huge agility changing the way we will service them. And I think two things really mattered. How quickly can our organization evolve to make our customers successful? And how do we make sure that the people, our own people at the center of providing those services to our customers are taken care of, are safe, and we are focused on their wellness? So as you think about our evolution as an organization, we exist and our purpose is pretty close to my heart. It's all about our relentless pursuit to make a place or world better for people, right? And in that purpose comes at the core all the people we service, our employees, our customers, and in the process, laying out our process and support infrastructure to enable that we have lights on. Because when it comes to supporting supply chain, if our team is playing a big role in making sure that the procurement process is supported and payments get done and the client's orders are taken, there is a huge role behind the scenes that our organization plays. And we were very clear that we need to make sure that, especially the essential services, wherever essential, we have to step up, put the support systems in place so that our employees are available to service our customers who are in turn servicing the end user in the world, right? So that continued to be the meaning behind everything we did. So very quickly, and see, the good news is this, that as an organization, we always had flexible work arrangements. We have acceptance and induction of technology deeply into the way we support our employees do their job. But within a span of a week or 10 days, when you had to literally figure out ways for employees not being able to reach offices and being able to service the customers and then supporting them in their own wellness journeys became the core and front of how we will evolve and service our customers. And the good news is this, Frank, the fact that Genpact's values are all about courage and curiosity, and on the bedrock of integrity, showing our incision to go for what works for the people we serve. I think that kept us going, and we kept failing fast and figuring out ways and constantly keeping our people at the center and saying, how do we continue to service to the best of our ability? So that's how I've seen the evolution of how we worked. But bottom line is, necessity is the mother of invention. We all figure out ways when we know we have to do it. The good news was a lot of clients and industries, which in the past would not have been so open to virtual ways of working and would have expected more often than not, especially in the sales process and in-person meeting, also opened up to the idea of virtual connections. And I think Vikramji talked about it. Virtual connections allowed us to connect more deeply with our customers without really getting stalled by whether I can reach a particular place physically or not. I could pick up the phone and talk to people. So there is a level of connectedness and closeness, the so-called socially distanced world created for us. And that's how I look at it personally as well, that it connected us in ways we never thought. But it created new, interesting opportunities and challenges, which we are all evolving and dealing with as we work with the new world order.
Thanks a lot, Shalu. And in fact, I'm seeing a very common thread to your insights that you shared for three of you. It's always a customer first. Right? You look at delivering a customer experience, although the channel, the outreach, the method of engagement has changed. But I think all of you look at the customer first. And then subsequently to see how do we support our employees, our organization, deliver the right systems and process, and Shalu talk about being flexible in doing so, to support our employees well so that they are able, they're okay, they are ready to support the customer. So I love this. And I see also what can be potentially a contradictory kind of a concept down here, right? Vikram mentioned about hyper-personalization, right? Which to me means that you need to really tailor, the solutions to individuals. And then Ongmu talked about simplicity. So I'd love to have some conversation around this later on how do you rationalize the two, and how do you inject, simplicity into hyper-personalization. But thanks a lot for this. It's very, very great feedback. So maybe just to the next question then. As we plan for the new normal, what are some of the key insights to the new ways of working you are seeing in a post-COVID environment? I know that many of people in the audience are looking at that right now. They are developing plans for the new normal and maybe a hybrid workforce. So what are your insights that you can share based on what you have gone through?
Frank, I can take a jab on that, maybe first.
Sure.
So very clearly when we talk about, because it's quite a linked question in terms of what we were trying to answer at the starting, because obviously the whole, how the ecosystem behaves is internally, how do you get some of those insights in terms of the changing way of doing things. One, very clearly, the health and the wellness started to take a center stage. And I can talk about my organization and personally, I believe even for others. And that's one of the big effects of social distancing was that we were left much more with us than usual as individuals, and a lot of, and somewhere some sense of loss of self in that ways, and therefore a lot around how do you build self-awareness, self-management, and then the whole organization helping you in that ways of going around for the health and the wellness for people. Second thing was around the reskilling bit of it. And that reskilling from a perspective of not only how do you build your digital capabilities, but how do you infuse that democratization of learning with that hyper personalization, which earlier also I talked about. So we actually went into creating a whole learning ecosystem where it is actually mobile based, where you actually, and was based upon that each one of us can learn in a very, very different way. Something, for example, just taking and a fictitious example is like assuming Ongmu would like to go through for building a particular skill is going through audio visuals and learning through that. While a Shalu may like to go through artifacts, I may personally like to go through actually a peer-to-peer learning, and while you may like to go through simulations. How do we, with the help of this digital disruption, how do we tend to build that ecosystem which has more than, say, suppose a million assets on these things, which are on whether we tied up with TED, we tied up with the global Ivy colleges, we built our own simulations which were there, we put in our own IPs, and then people they know about their gaps, they can go about actually using this democratized way of learning like a Netflix, and then depending on your personas, get a very hyper personalized recommendation in terms of what you use. And once you start using the assets and building in, Netflix, it further then recommends on those sites. Now, that's where the reskilling actually went into a very different paradigm, not by only looking at. Another thing which really changed was how do you look at work life balances for people, help them in that ways to design it better, and especially while working from home. The whole concept changed from a perspective when it started in that way. The leadership requirements change. A lot of times that particular build up of a new kind of empathetic approach, but however building upon the right tools for measurement the outcomes for people, and therefore helping to build the right trust in terms of what people were doing remotely in that. Uh, the last thing was the purpose driven employee was a big thing. And when especially you're remote, you need to tie up with your employees. Then what purpose are they actually? Are they, how much are they attached to the society also from that perspective overall? But more important is what's the purpose of the organization? Where do their jobs fit in, and how do they do that? And last, the governance and the controls actually change totally. At least 40% of them change in the remote settings. How do you actually, because even a HR job is not only of advisory, some of the times it's also about how are you actually has a gatekeeper job from a governance and control perspective. How do you build on that? And last but not the least, database driven HR, totally in that ways to provide those solutions very, very fast in that way.
Right. Thanks. There's a lot of thoughts on here. Anyone, Shalu, would you like to share your
Yeah.
thoughts?
I will, Frank. In fact, I was going to build on Vikramjit because he said all the things, I guess, and as he pointed out, most of us in our organizations have seen us step up and say, how do we focus on wellness of our employees? How do we continue to invest in ways to upskill them, cross-skill them, so that they are not just relevant for future jobs, but also are able to tackle to the sudden expectations to perform in the current job with the new infrastructure in which they had to perform, right? So investing in learning obviously took the center stage. Investing in wellness, and wellness not just by telling people about the fact that you should focus on your health, but also creating that space, right? Mental wellness is not just about telling somebody that you should take care of this aspect of your health, but it's also about creating that safe space for people to step up, discuss, and get help. So our organization invested a lot in, how do we help our employees on making meditation a part of how they live and perform. How do managers get sensitized about supporting the employees in recalibrating priorities and how work will get done? And I think we all, to a certain degree, underestimate the effort it takes. Once the things change around us, the change that we have to do in the support environment. And I really believe, Frank, that results from people is an outcome of three towers. How you enable them, which is how do you make sure that they are able to do what they're supposed to. That's where all our good frameworks, toolkits, infrastructure, training, certification, all that comes. But just because your people are able to do something, are they supposed to do it or not? So how do you then evolve your scorecard, your measurement system? What becomes score to getting work done, but is also in an acknowledged open manner accepted to be not just the way of working, but also calibrating the goals which are possible in the current environment. So how do you evolve things, and how do you communicate those things in terms of what's a mandate, what's enforced on all of us as employees to be able to do to serve our larger purpose and existence of the organization? And the third pillar, which a lot of the organizations either spend little time or take it for granted, is the encouragement part. And the reason I want to talk a little bit about encouragement is this, that even in the new world, and the new world where digital infusion became really high and everybody started talking about transforming the ways of working, how we get work done, how do we engage with customers, if we don't give support through the way we evolve our culture, the way we accept things will not be the same old way. And there is a little bit of unlearning and relearning, which culturally we all have to do. So it's like, I'm able to do something and I'm supposed to do something. But how am I influencing the willingness of the people to step up and do those things? So you can invest in training programs and you can invest in the best of technology to get a particular work done. So we would reimagine the way onboarding gets done. Imagine earlier new hire integrations are all in person. Everybody will come together in a room. We would love the energy and connections we will build. Now, overnight, we were faced with the challenge to say, okay, how do we get that same sense of belonging and connectedness for people who won't get to meet each other at all? Right?
Mhm.
You can't just walk in the office bays and go into somebody's cabin or in the Bay Area, meet your team. You suddenly have to create a new way of connections. And
Mhm.
while it was challenging, technology played a big role. And with that came the challenge of what Ongmu touched upon. How do you simplify before you automate? And that's a very tricky one. A lot of digital transformation journeys fail to meet the business objectives because we jump into just throwing technology at a process. And we
Mhm.
don't step back looking at it from three levers. Number one, the context. Why should we use this tech? What's the purpose? What will it achieve for our people who we are serving? Be the client, be the employee, be the operator who's using that tech to make something happen. So that whole aspect of context. The second aspect is how will you use that data? In Genpact, we started using very extensively a chatbot, which is an AI-based chatbot called Amber. And this tool is pretty interesting because it interacts with you at key moments of truth. And during the peak of COVID, we used to use that bot to interact with people in a safe environment where the bot would ask them questions about wellness and what are top of their mind concerns. And that information had direct visibility at the highest level. So we use technology to break silos, to use data and interpret what were the patterns of concerns coming up, what people are liking, where they are struggling. And we didn't have to pick up the phone and talk to everybody, but thousands of employees responded to that chat talking about how are they feeling, what is their mood like, and what could Genpact do about using those patterns to take corrective actions and in a lot of cases take preventive action. So I think that as we are evolving and using technology to our advantage, it also is an opportunity to keep context, how we will use this data in an ethical manner to make things work for our people, and then constantly ask ourselves, is this making our work more efficient? How are we deploying the aspect of simplification before we just deploy technology and maybe complicate life of all the folks who will use it? I think these were some of our learnings and some of the lessons that we have learned through as we went about accelerating our own speed of adopting technology in the way we were operating for our people.
Mhm. I love this, Shalu. It's really, really very, very relevant. I mean, it's not about just the what do we change, but the how do we do it in a way that will enable and encourage the employees. And I love your example of using technology in the right context in order to serve, the people as well as the customers rather than go against it. So that was really, really absolutely relevant. Yes, just want to check with Omnu. Any insights that you have related to the future working environment?
Yeah, and I was a lot of things, Shalu and Vikramjit have said, but for me, I think, in addition to what they said, right, we can't underestimate the societal impact this has had. So one is we all talk about business models, etc., but there is a huge impact on society, and if there is a huge impact on society, there's a huge impact on people, and hence the culture of companies. So for me, I really look at it with that lens. So I was thinking, right, number one is we think there is the new normal, but something comes up and there's a new variant. So we don't even know what the new normal is going to be like, Frank.
Mm-hmm.
Things change. Sometimes there's a lockdown, sometimes there's not. There's vaccination, there's a new strain. So I think when we look at it, the new normal is really about how people adapt to the new situations very quickly. The business model, by and large, unless it's a sector that's hugely impacted, stays intact. But how quickly you bring agility to ways of working and not create strain in the organizations, because this is getting painful. There's a term called languishing being used nowadays, right? This is not like a 2-month period, 3-month period. So how do you create that agility without people getting tired? And that's where that impact on mental health and well-being becomes, and I think that becomes really critical, and that is going to be the new normal. The second aspect for me is really culture of an organization. I do believe personally, and I could be wrong, that we are all locked up in our houses. We are probably becoming less inclusive and less diverse in our social interactions. We are meeting people who we want to meet. We are not traveling, therefore, we are not meeting people that we normally would not meet. And therefore, I do believe that there is this big piece around IND that might get lost in translation. And along with it is managers building trust, and also about managing performance remotely. How do you manage performance remotely? How do you have these conversations? It's a very different way of face to face versus remote management on performance. And for businesses to survive, you need to manage performance in the new world. And the last and fundamental piece is about big role of leaders and managers. Resilience, I think, is going to be really, really critical. How leaders manage their own resilience and how they allow for employees and people to talk about it. And within this is how are we going to manage careers in the new normal? People don't want to leave their homes. People are stuck. There are tax issues coming in place as we start moving people around, right? It's very, very different, the world. There is a whole aspect towards how we manage careers remotely as well. And I think these are things that we continue to learn. uh, but I often see there is the impact on society, on mental health, on diversity, on inclusion. And if we don't play a close watch on it, how do we drive cultures in an organization? I think is going
Mhm.
to become very, very critical. Yeah.
Right, right. Sounds like such a humongous task that all of us in HR, as HR practitioners, have to undertake. Right? How to drive the culture, how to enable our people, how to build skills of our leaders within the organization, both their own coping skills as well as leadership skills in a world that is so agile. And at the same time, as some of you rightly pointed out, how do we ensure that we do this in a culturally sensitive and in a compliance way that does not upset some of the regulators in different parts of the world. So huge amounts of efforts, and I know I really salute HR leaders here, in undertaking this. Is really putting up a brave front, while we are sometimes struggling along the way. And so, just in line with this, I just want to also jump kind of adjacently into the next question, which is, how do you see HR, partnering with line of business leaders in the midst of this change, in the midst of this transformation? And in fact, I am glad to hear firsthand, three of you mentioning customer firsts, right? But how do we enable a customer first kind of culture organization by effectively partnering with other members of the organization? Anyone you want to share, especially with respect to your own industry?
I can.
Any?
I mean, since I'm just like,
Yes, please. Yes,
I
please.
can, I can, I can go first, and then I'd be really keen to also hear from Shalu and Vikram as well. So, I go back to the fundamentals of, because it is such a crazy world out there, and it is very, very busy. There is a huge role that we have to simplify things for managers, leaders, employees, everybody. Say, for example, if it's learning solutions, right? There's so much information. So, what is HR's role in curating the content and bringing it relevant? How do you create managers to do a lot more self-service? I think there is this big piece, Frank, around that being the business enabler, because what you need to do is, you need to free up time of managers and employees to do what they're supposed to do,
Mhm.
which is already dealing with business in a very, very challenging environment, number one, and supporting them in their own mental health. The last thing you want is to add a added complexity of the HR processes. And a lot of HR processes, we've grown up in organizations and in times when our processes are quite complex. And it is. We have policies, we have workarounds, we have approval processes. We tend to do these to ourselves as a function, right? And I think that's the piece that has to change. How do we really make it simple? How do you use the right technology? And how do you really build leaders, have the resilience to manage unpredictable business results? I think capabilities again is a next piece. I really look at it because, and when I look at capabilities, I don't mean digital capabilities. I mean, looking at agility. How do we build those skills in managers? How do we allow for managers to think about what are the skills needed 5 years down the line? You don't have to wait for a pandemic to shift your business. We often say the pandemic accelerated digital transformation, but could you have done that ahead? Of course, the pandemic happened, so we were forced to. But I think that's where we need to get managers to do, is really think future, think forward, and what is it that we need to do to transform now, right? um, Talent management is a big piece of HR, and I feel we need to drive a lot of self-service on talent management. I think gone are the days when managers and HR tell employees that this is the right career move for them. I think we need to do a little bit more self-service. They need to build the skills, and they need to, almost get into a situation where they say, I want to go here, I want to go there, etc. So I think
Mm,
the skills piece becomes very, very important on talent. you know New jobs are not a given. With restrictions on mobility, we are not going to be able to grow careers the way it is. So how do you build skills in that new context? How do we do succession planning? I mean, in a world that is either, we are going to live with the pandemic, we are going to live with the virus. How do you do succession planning with new skills, when a prolonged situation could change your business model? Things
mm,
like that. I think for me, that's really where I see it. And for me, in our functions, I think it's a lot of what both Bikramjit and Shalu said is, how do we create those moments that matter, right, for each of the employees, and how do we really invest in the right tools and technologies? I think that's where I see our function play a big role as well. So there's a business piece and then our own function.
definitely, yeah. And these two pieces will interact all the time, right? To ensure
Yeah,
that it's moving forward. Right.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I
Now,
love almost way of articulating what we as HR have to look at and how do we balance what business expects of us. If I were to just add on or build on what Amu just said, you know, I started by saying that I believe people results come because you enable, you enforce, and you hugely encourage the right things. And this has been true forever, right? All of us are motivated and supported or corrected sometimes given these three pillars. Now, with COVID coming in, I really think we all have to step back, and be it HR leadership, the HR business partners, and even the business leaders and the business frontline teams, we all have to step back and ask ourselves, given the nature of change that's happening, and Ango made a very good point. She said, the new normal is also changing. It's almost like every month or 2 months, we realize something that
mhm,
challenges the old ways of doing things, right? So there is a huge aspect of deep reflective thinking to say, in the new normal, which is right now in front of me, what are some of the things that I have to take calls on today? And I cannot delay them, and I cannot wait for what the world does. So I
mhm,
can no longer be that fence sitter who waits for the other industries, other companies, other departments to do something or try something new, and then I'll get onto it. I
mhm,
have to mentally now move into a mode as a leader to accept the risk of not knowing everything, right? This whole
mhm,
feeling of the moment you get to know what you don't know. I feel my journey as a curious problem solver has always been this, to start by asking myself what I don't know. And
mhm,
then I'll ask lots of people about what do you think about this and what do you know, so that I can self-reflect and say, what do I don't know? I think one of the skill that we all as HR facilitators and support to leadership success in our organizations, we have to start doing is to helping our people deal with this demand of the world to deal with risk and change at the pace and speed which is hugely uncomfortable for most people.
mhm,
And the fact is we don't have a choice. We can try and sugarcoat it, or we can try and give them a lot of space to take their time to go through the whole curve of denial and then acceptance and move through it. But the cycle is so crashed because the question is of survival. Whether my organization will survive through this next 3 months. And most often than not, the answer, at least in the last 15 months, has been, if we don't change quick enough
mhm,
or adapt in an agile manner, which is as frequent as every quarter, I'm going
mhm,
to struggle as a company, I'm going to struggle as an employee, and I'm going to struggle as a boss or a supervisor or a leader. So I think the
mhm,
one big thing which we all have to figure out ways is to learn to deeply think And in a world with less information, which can, substantiate or proof points that can say, okay, this decision is better than that decision, I think we have to create networks beyond just the core network of my department, my company. I guess my industry, my region, my world is now the new boundary to say, think what others are doing and learn what is working for them in the shortest possible time. See how well can you adapt, but then don't be afraid of making mistakes. Be
Mhm.
accepting of the fact that you will not be perfect. So it's like, the classic product design strategy of saying you will have minimal viable product 1 and then 2, and you will fail and you will revise. You will have to go through this iterative process, and every time you iterate, as long as you have the acceptance that you don't know everything and you're doing the best with the collective wisdom of people around you, I think it will make us far more successful in solving for what comes our way. Because at this moment, in all organization and personally as an individual, I feel we know less than what we know. And everybody says in business that is real. And as I have been leading transformation for a long time now, I can tell you there are always more unknowns than knowns in transformation. But imagine this: every person in the organization has become a chief transformation leader for their own area of work. And they're constantly thinking, how do I make sure my work gets done today? And I don't miss out on what impacts somebody else's life. So in an HR role, it's impacting my employees. An employee who is serving the customer role, it is impacting the customer's delivery. So I guess as long as we wear that hat of saying, at this moment, given the paucity of data, what's the collective wisdom telling me? Being open to accepting it, iterating it as we go, learning, unlearning, relearning, and not letting our egos come in between, I think we'll be far better off and less stressed than what we will tend to be, because we are chasing some perfection which doesn't even exist today.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Right. Vikramjit, you have any things to add?
Sure, Frank. Frank, having heard obviously Shalu and Ongmu also spoke about it. Personally, when I look at it, there are two things to solve as a practitioner when I look at it. One is some of the times the large bloated approaches in terms of looking at an organization overall as one entity, and then you look at obviously in terms of how do you help as a partner, where technology is being a big equalizer for a lot of us. There are various technologies which are on a SaaS models available for us to deploy, but one key thing which from a hyper personalization is also equally, which Ongmu also touched upon, is the simplicity you bring in the organization. How do you bring that is one thing as a HR in that way. See, very, very important is when we look at organization, we have to understand, and I'm personally saying from my experience, I may say, is that every employee is one unit, one organization unit. When we start to actually reflect upon that bit of it and see to all the experiences which are there, because situations will change and situation will continuously change even after this. It's not going to be, I will personally believe, maybe the speed is a little faster, but this is bound to stay, the change. Then how do you actually build in those enabling frameworks which the ownership is taken by employee to do? And maybe let me take two, three examples to maybe qualify that statement a little more. So one, very, very clearly, HR should, more than a business partner, while the word business partner is two times used and abused also in certain ways, which is there, uh, is how do you really build in enabling frameworks which are simple, but equally are tied up to every individual to have that, that flexibility to do that. Let's assume we a lot of times are talking about gig frameworks and how do we help. In these current times, a lot of times employees have two big problems when we went into doing service. One is the ambiguity of what's going to happen in future. Starting from the time the COVID was there and even during the mid time and even today, because things are changing fast. How do you solve that ambiguity? Second, they are always wanting to do more. Let's assume the positive side of employees always. We started to do a project economy where we said people can actually work into projects other than their own areas for which can actually help in a dollar saved or a dollar earned extra. And if they do that, turning them into partners for the organization where they will get a X percentage of that, which is, we try to do a lot of virtual hackathons, business hackathons, not a IT hackathon, where we actually took on the new problems which business was facing, got everybody across 200 plus geographies to actually participate. There were more than 8,000 people for 2 continuous days trying to solve some of the business problems. And if they were doing well, obviously getting them the right monetary as well as the recognition awards. See, the role of HR as a partner is always to how do you link with the business strategy is my personal take. And in that whole personal business strategy, how do you help them to not only have the solutions for right now, but equally help them see the little distant future and make them take the ownership of it, which is there, and enable them with all those simplistic, but again saying democratized but hyper personalized frameworks along with it. And now with people being ready to implement and using, now see, as simple as saying you are using Alexa, people will want something inside like Alexa. Maybe you may not be able to develop it yourself, but how do you build an ecosystem with external SaaS to do that? Second is how do you provide people that ownership of doing? We introduce the promotion process as a weekly process. Now you can actually apply for any job every week, get promoted. Every week in a sense, not that every week you are getting promoted, but you have a minimum 1 year tenure, and then after that, wherever you want to apply, you can continue. It's an open framework. We said even in an external world, you can go and apply anywhere. Why not within the organization, whichever position? Now most organizations struggle with that. How do you? We went into to solve ambiguity and the big problem of trust of managers. We went into actually building up, saying your monthly and quarterly
Oh dear.
and the output measured monthly and quarterly for even non-sales. It's easy to do for sales. Here is where when you do it for everyone and everybody knows and they are tied up with not only their
Oh dear. Vikramjit, we are losing you a bit. I'm not sure. Is it just me or Salu and Amur? Are you feeling the same?
performance. Is it better now, Frank?
Okay, I think there's a bit
Is
of
it better?
there's a bit of latency coming on your side because you freeze, and then I couldn't hear you well. But
Okay.
I think I got your message regarding essentially thinking long term, establishing the framework, as well as ensuring that you're agile enough to make the change, right? And I think I love your suggestion about creating projects internally for people to try out new things and be compensated or rewarded for that. So I know that there's a bit of latency on your side, but let's see whether you can sort it out in the next round. But I think in the interest of time too, let me just go to an audience question, right? And I think this is something that's quite relevant to our topic, which is about OneHR, right? So the question is that OneHR really means moving out of silos in HR, right? TA, L&D, OD, and so on, and into one combined organization to support our organization. So perhaps in one paragraph, right? I know it doesn't add credit there, but in one paragraph, what's your understanding? What's your concept of OneHR?
I can start, and maybe everybody else can chime in. I've always believed that the HR team's existence in the business is to serve three purposes. The first one is to staff right people at the right time, so that we have people to do what we want the organization to do, right? So the first objective is, are we able to staff people in the fastest possible manner? The second objective that we have is to make sure that we are constantly, intentionally investing in engaging with our diverse workforce in a very inclusive and collaborative manner. So everything we do to get that engagement, because there is enough data in the world that tells you that there is merit in investing in people engagement. It's a pretty well studied and scientifically proven space, direct relation between profitability and people engagement. And the third one is to constantly optimize the performance, the utilization, and leveraging the skills that you hire, and then optimizing that utilization in the context of the larger costs of running the operations of the business with people. Now, if these three are the big objectives that are directly linked to the growth of the company, the profitability of the company, and all the key outcomes that matter to the shareholders, if I can put it that way, our existence is not by just being the best L&D function or the best compensation and benefit function or the best recruitment function. Our success as HR comes when we all come together and realize the interconnected nature of our work. And let me take one example because then it'll just spread out to say what one HR really means. Supposing we all have to be, committed to staffing right people at the right time in the fastest and the most employee and candidate friendly manner. Think about it. Our traditional thinking is the best people will come out of external recruitment process. So let's open the indent fast and let's get the pipeline created. But the lateral thinking or the one HR thinking is that when you want to staff people and you start thinking about your supply chain of talent to balance demand of people versus the supply of people, there is an internal marketplace. People who aspire to do more, to be more, who have been long enough with you, who would want to make a great career with you. Now, the moment you start saying that your demand of talent can be fulfilled by two sources, and actually in the gig economy, three sources, a full-time employee coming from outside with some rich experience outside of your organization. And then there are people who have invested in themselves over a period of time internally, who we want to help navigate and pick and support them in their great careers, are another source. And the third source is the gig economy who wants to come do targeted projects as consultants and contractors and do that work and finish and move on. The moment you start thinking like that, you have to integrate how do you put in effort around your learning and development processes so that you are preparing people for the future talent demands of the company, so that you are career pathing people as you help them stream their career rather than just a career ladder, stream their career through different opportunities within the organization and not just create a great career for themselves, but also service client needs, which are upcoming and new and niche. So just imagine when we say one HR, the whole interconnected nature of how an HR business partner plays a role in identifying high potential talent, helping them invest in targeted learning and development programs, and preparing them for a future role, while we constantly balance and take decisions. How do we seed fresh talent from outside and integrate them correctly? So there is a role of right compensation. There is a role of right training and development investment. There is a role of how HR services can help my employee focus on their work versus worrying about when their next payroll slip will come and will it have errors, and how quickly with my error HR query get resolved. So when HR is all about being interconnected and constantly looking at the business outcomes that we as HR department commit to our organization's growth and success, and then work backwards to say, how will we use data? How will we seed experience? And how will we see the synergistic impact of all departments to meet that ultimate output? So to me, that's how one HR comes to life.
Right, excellent, excellent. And so with our two other practitioners, Sangwoo and Vikram, as CHRO, VP for HR, how do you bring this together?
Yeah, I can go next. I guess whenever we look at and Shalu spoke about the fundamental reason for our existence as a function is to make sure businesses thrive. Yeah, it's really about that. And for that, we need all of the different cylinders firing. So for me, COEs are deep experts. They are the ones that think of the future. They are the ones that, look at insights and trends. And then you have the services organization that is focusing on cost excellence, technology. And then you have the business partner part of the function that really looks at, talent, leadership, culture, capability. For me as a CHRO, I think it's about everybody being comfortable in doing what they're doing. Yeah. And it's a lot to do with ways of working. Are the experts really being leveraged? Are business partners really focusing on their leadership and capability? Or are they focusing on something else that probably somebody is more expert and is more designed to do? I think it's really about that for me. And I think for me, how do I bring one HR to life is a lot about the culture of HR. It's very important that HR think of not us versus them. And I'm putting it very simply. It's about we in HR. Lots of times, business partners, oh, like services team didn't deliver, or the COE did not deliver. It's not that, because that creates confusion for the business. What we need to do is really make sure that culturally we think of one HR. And it's easier said than done, because there's a big piece around not passing the buck, but owning the buck that's at your table. So for me, simply put, that's really how I bring OneHR to life. It's our
Excellent.
own culture.
Yeah, I love about owning the bug. It's like,
Yeah.
the bug talks with us, right?
Yeah. We
And
can have the best of the processes. We may have the best of technology, but if we have the wrong mindset in HR to deliver this model, it's never going to work. So we need
absolutely
leaders, HR leaders who think in that manner, who think one HR.
right, right, excellent. And Vikram, did any last piece of advice for our audience here?
So, Frank, I look at it in two ways. It's like an automobile where, as assembly, where different parts have to work together to really get a right performance out of that automobile, whether it's a car or whichever we are looking at. And COEs, or whether business partners, or whether in terms of optimizers, in terms of transformation experts, everything has to work together to get the desired output, which is there. Uh, in an organization, there are two ways. One is exactly Ongbu touched upon the culture bit of it. How do you really, from the top, really lead this culture actually, and really in your own ways of how do you really recognize the right efforts and equally. But another bit of is how do you intertwine this in a structure for
Mm,
people where their rewards are also linked in a certain way and the recognition is also linked in a certain way, where there is an obviously a penchant for individual performance, but equally for the intertwined performance of a one HR, which
mm,
is there. Once you start doing it, is only the time when this machinery really, really works. Like even in an automobile, you the nuts and the bolts which are at the right places, they need to be very rightfully done and fastened with certain loose ends of moving around in that way. So that loose ends is everybody has to perform their job, but they
right.
need to get tied in the intertwined way on the the rewards and the recognition also in a certain way, and driving that culture from the top, which is there around these things. Because if you're not a
Excellent.
hard driver, automatically this will get lost also in a certain
I love your systematic way of looking at it, as like an automobile, to tie everything together and everything functions together as a system. Thanks so much to Shalu, Vikramsit, and Omu for all your insights. I think we have learned so much today. I took away so many things. Being customer first as the driver, simplicity, hyper personalization plus flexibility, and we have from Shalu, enablement, enforcement, and encouragement. I think these are some of the things that we have all taken away. So thank you so much for sharing with us all your thoughts and your especially practical advice. And so before we end this, there is a survey link in the chat box for the audience, and if you can click on that and give us your feedback, you'll be very well appreciated. At the same time, we have also some links in the chat box on some of the additional resources that our audience can have to understand a lot more about how HR transformation, organizational transformation can be effected. So with this, I just want to thank the three of our distinguished panelists. Thank you so much for your time, and we hope that we can continue to keep in touch and work towards a better and brighter future for all of us. Thank you, everyone, and have a good day.